I would say that our biggest challenges are really the combination of different challenges. So we're seeing geopolitics interconnected with issues of the energy transition and climate change, interconnected with issues of economics and inequality. And one of the difficulties we have is that we have traditionally approached many of these issues with siloed expertise, either expertise of individuals in particular domains or particular departments, either domestically or internationally, that focus on parts of these problems. And I think really in our complex and interconnected world, where we really need innovation is how do we think about these bigger, complex and interconnected challenges? And that's where I really want to see innovation in the 21st century. The approach that I'm really interested in at the moment is what I call dragonfly thinking. So in the work of Philip Tetlock, who's a psychologist and political scientist who did work with the intelligence agencies in the US, what they found is that people who were traditional experts tended to be very poor at understanding complex problems in order to predict forward, because they tended to have one main lens that they used to analyze the problem, and that allowed them to be blindsided by other considerations that they weren't focused on. Instead, they found that the people that were the best at forecasting and understanding complex problems were people that saw the world through dragonfly eyes, because dragonflies actually have thousands of different lenses that they incorporate into an almost 360-degree view of reality. And so I guess one of my questions is, how can governments and international organizations, businesses and individuals, how can we all start to see through dragonfly eyes? We've become really interested in the way in which we can actually power the approach of dragonfly thinking through creating AI tools, because one of the things that large language models give us is an ability to synthesize insights from across the world and across many different disciplines. And so we're creating analytical tools that sit on top of the large language models to be able to look at things from an economic perspective, a security perspective, a health perspective, and an environmental perspective, but also potentially to look at it from different stakeholder or actor perspectives. How does it look from China's eyes? How does it look from Russia's eyes? How does it look from America's eyes or from particular companies? And I think that level of being able to synthesize so broadly is hugely helped by the power of AI to read and digest such diverse and large amounts of content. I think when I think about the AI, that it is actually tends to be very good at interdisciplinary analysis and to breaking down silos and dealing with these complex problems. But the underlying data sets for most of the frontier models that we're seeing out of the US still tend to be very English language, Western and US dominated. And that means that they don't have nearly as much cultural similarity or awareness in their answers to many other parts of the globe. And so one of the things I'm interested in is, how do we get more representation from diverse cultural views to be represented well in the LLMs? Because I think that will lead to richer contextual understanding for different parts of the world. But it's also really important for intelligence analysis and strategic decision-making, whether you're in government or whether you're in business. So I'd like to see a greater diversity of language and cultural bases being represented well in large language models. Well, I think there's definitely historically the case that that is the time we tend to look. But I think we are seeing a sort of renewed interest in futures and foresighting techniques. So I think when things are relatively stable, people often prefer very strong economic models or quantitative models, which allow for sort of prediction. But those predictions often work better in times of relative lack of turbulence. When we're dealing with much higher turbulence, complexity, and uncertainty, what I think we're going to see is a renewed focus on futures thinking, scenarios-based approaches. And that really requires us to start thinking ahead of time about all the many things that can happen to us, because we can't predict or quantitatively assess what's likely to happen in the future. So we need to become more prepared ahead of time. We're seeing a strong move towards language of resilience. And really, if you want to be resilient and systemically resilient, you don't resile, you prepare.